he's saying that, Diddy, he put a hit out on you and Tupac, and that's the reason why Tupac got in Vegas. So, yeah, man. How you feel about that?
Well, first thing first. I mean, that conversation been out there. He put his truth out there. A lot of other people put their truth out there.
Sean Combs just lost the grip on his own story, and now the walls are closing in faster than his lawyers can blink. The once carefully polished image of hip-hop's untouchable power player is falling apart right before everyone's eyes, and this time, it's not just another rumor or lawsuit. The real storm is hitting because the same threats he allegedly used to silence people for decades are now being read out loud in court, under oath, with names, dates, and sworn statements. According to one male associate's testimony filed this week, Combs cornered him after a 2012 assault and dropped a chilling line that still echoes with danger. He allegedly told him, "If I can get Shakur hit, what you think can happen to you?" That statement isn't just a threat. It sounds like a confession, full of arrogance and menace. And now, that same quote is being repeated inside a Manhattan courtroom, turning what once sounded like street talk into potential evidence linking him to a 27-year-old cold case and more than 70 legal claims tearing apart his empire piece by piece. Investigators say the math doesn't lie. There's talk of $1 million in alleged bounty money promised to a CRIPS enforcer for a Vegas job that supposedly never got paid. Add to that a former business partner's stash of 30 boxes of handwritten ledgers showing suspicious car rentals, last-minute flight changes, and even a recorded prison phone call where Combs himself is reportedly heard freaking out saying, "There's no way we can get away with this." Yet somehow, up until now, he did. In his recent trial, jurors were seen nodding along to his defense, and one even admitted she couldn't separate the man in the dock from the hitmaker who shaped the soundtrack of her youth. But that loyalty might finally be cracking, because this time, the hits are coming from the courtroom, not the studio. The cracks are starting to split wide open, and the real break isn't buried in the past, it's happening right now. Reports say nearly $200 million was suddenly shuffled through hidden bank accounts just days before his arrest. And people are asking who else in the industry knew enough to keep their mouths shut. The twist? The man set to testify against Sean Combs next February isn't just another name on a witness list. He's the alleged trigger man who says he never got paid for the job. That's not just messy, that's explosive. This whole thing isn't only about what Combs might have done years ago, it's about what he's still trying to keep buried and who's been protecting him behind the scenes. Every new detail peels back another layer, and it's getting darker by the minute. The second that phrase, "If I can get Shakur hit, what you think can happen to you?" showed up in that Manhattan court filing, everything shifted. Combs' entire defense started twisting under its own weight. This isn't just another line in a stack of 70-plus lawsuits. It's a straight shot connecting a private showdown in 2012 to the unsolved execution in Las Vegas 16 years earlier. And here's where it gets even more intense. The man who dropped that statement, Steve Otis, isn't some random opportunist. He's a former associate who claims Combs attacked him inside a Midtown hotel suite, then threw out that chilling threat using one of hip-hop's most infamous tragedies as leverage to make sure he stayed silent. The story's no longer whisper level. It's blowing wide open. What makes this moment stand out isn't just the coldness of the threat, it's the way it was delivered, like business talk, not a reminder of a life ended by 4 bullets on the Vegas Strip. It wasn't rage, it was routine, said with the same tone someone uses when talking about a missed deadline, not murder. That's what makes it terrifying. And here's where the story stops playing by the old script. Steve Otis didn't come forward back when the alleged assault happened, not when Combs first faced indictments, and not even when the Netflix doc dropped all those bombshells. He waited. He stayed silent until Combs was already locked up, until the power shifted, until the man who once made people vanish with a single phone call couldn't touch him anymore. That timing screams strategy, not coincidence. It's not just what Combs may have said that matters. It's how long people waited for the right moment to say it. The real question now isn't whether Combs said those chilling words. It's how many other private talks started the exact same way. If I can get Shakur hit, what you think can happen to you? And how many people are still too scared to repeat what came next? Because silence has been the armor protecting this empire for decades. Combs' official version of events, the story his team has spent millions keeping alive, paints him as a bystander in 1996, watching tragedy unfold from the sidelines. According to that narrative, Tupac Shakur's death was just the tragic result of a coastal rivalry that spiraled out of control. A sad clash of egos, gang politics, and bad timing. In that story, Combs wasn't pulling strings. He was the guy preaching peace after the storm. But the paperwork tells a whole different tale, and it's written in ink that doesn't fade. The 2008 and 2009 police interviews with Dwayne Keith D. Davis, a former Southside CRIPS enforcer now sitting in jail awaiting trial for Shakur's execution, paint a shocking picture. Davis didn't just admit his own role. He allegedly pointed straight at Combs as the man who put up the money. $1 million in cash, he claimed, handed over in a room full of gang members with one chilling instruction: handle the problem. And that's where the story shifts from rumor to record, where whispers start sounding a lot like evidence, meaning Shakur and Suge Knight were the supposed targets. But here's the twist. Dwayne Keith D. Davis says he never saw a single cent of that promised million. In that world, that's not just a broken deal. That's a betrayal that can flip the whole street silent no more. Now Davis is talking, and not because he suddenly grew a conscience.
Do you think that this trial is going to be the end of the story?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But it's a start. You know, my brother was legend. His was legend.
He's speaking because payback in that game has no expiration date. The clock on revenge runs way longer than the one on the crime itself. His trial is set to kick off this February, and the prosecution's entire case leans hard on those old interviews where Davis dropped names with no hesitation. Behind courthouse doors, lawyers are whispering, not about whether Davis is being honest, but about whether he's the only one ready to spill, and what kind of chaos could hit if more people start doing the same. Here's where the timeline starts to twist in ways nobody saw coming. Back in August 1996, just weeks before that infamous Vegas shooting, Kirk Burroughs, the co-founder of Bad Boy Records and the guy who handled all the money, wrote in his personal notes that Combs suddenly demanded multiple rental cars for a trip to the Mike Tyson fight. Not jets, not first-class flights, but a convoy of rentals driving from New York all the way to Nevada. Burroughs logged every expense like clockwork and even called the move unusual at the time. But now, with Davis's statement about the hit being planned ahead of time, those car rentals hit different. What once looked like a quirky travel choice is now being re-examined as something else entirely. Maybe a setup to move people, gear, or even weapons under the radar, leaving no obvious paper trail behind. Every new piece of the puzzle makes that old story look less like bad luck and more like precision. Those journals don't just stop at financial notes. They dive deep into Combs' mindset, and it's not pretty. Burroughs wrote about Combs' growing obsession with Tupac Shakur's influence over Biggie Smalls, his rising frustration with Suge Knight's control of the West Coast, and how he kept saying he needed to take care of the problem. That phrase shows up more than once, and every time, it sounds colder, sharper, and more calculated. Burroughs held on to those notes for decades, even after Combs fired him, just 90 days after Biggie's own tragic death. That's the same amount of time it took for the headlines and heartbreak to fade from the front pages. Maybe it's coincidence, or maybe it's timing that speaks volumes. Now, those same journals have landed in the hands of Netflix's documentary team, but here's where things get wild. The most important pages, the ones detailing the days before and after the Vegas trip, have never been released to the public. That's not a random gap, that's leverage. Someone's holding the real cards, and it's clear they're waiting for the perfect moment to play them. But the biggest inconsistencies aren't even in the allegations. They're in how Combs and his people react every single time the heat turns up. When Dwayne Keith D. Davis first made his claims back in 2008, Combs' camp brushed it off as the nonsense of a felon trying to cut a deal. When Kirk Burroughs filed his lawsuit in 2003, they buried him under mountains of legal fees until he backed off. And when Netflix dropped this documentary last December exposing more Shakur-related claims, Combs' spokesperson fired back, calling it a one-sided story pushed by a public enemy. But this time, when Steve Otis came forward with that new lawsuit, the one quoting the Shakur threat word for word, Combs' legal team didn't deny it, didn't correct it, didn't even comment. That silence says more than any press statement could. Something's shifting. And it feels like the walls around that empire are about to start cracking loud enough for everyone to hear. Instead of speaking out, insiders say Combs' camp is in full-blown panic mode, scrambling to lock everything down before his trial begins. Word is, Davis's lawyers plan to call Steve Otis to the stand, and that has everyone around Combs sweating bullets. That's not the behavior of a man who believes he's innocent. That's the behavior of someone watching the dominoes fall, knowing the next one could bring the whole empire crashing down. What's coming into focus now is chilling. Combs didn't just allegedly call the shots for a hit. He built an entire system to make sure no one could ever trace it back to him. The sketchy car rentals, the unpaid bounty, the cryptic threats, none of it was random. It was insurance, a safety net made of fear and silence. And for years, it worked perfectly. Even jurors in his last trial admitted they couldn't separate the legend from the man accused, even after seeing that shocking footage of him assaulting Cassie Ventura. The illusion of fame still had people hypnotized. Inside the industry, the ones who knew about what really went down at those wild parties, they kept quiet, not because they didn't care, but because they were eating off his success. His power bought their silence. Even law enforcement hit a wall. The LAPD's investigation into Biggie's tragic death froze cold when witnesses suddenly stopped talking. And former Detective Greg Kading later claimed Combs' team actively worked to block the case from moving forward. For years, that web of influence protected him from everything. But that kind of control only lasts so long. The game changes when $200 million suddenly moves through hidden accounts right before an arrest. That's not random timing. That's someone trying to get ahead of the storm, and this storm is closing in fast, faster than even Combs' money can outrun. And that $200 million transfer was just the first crack in the wall. The Otis lawsuit became the second, and once Keith D's trial kicks off, that'll be the third hit in a row. And the thing about dominoes, once the first one tips, there's no stopping the rest. The only question left now is, how many people go down with him when it all collapses? But here's the real kicker. The most damaging evidence isn't buried in legal files or Netflix documentaries. It's written all over the faces and reactions of the people who've known Combs the longest. Mark Curry, a former Bad Boy artist, broke down on camera in the Netflix doc, describing how Combs would make an example out of anyone who dared to cross him. And Aubrey O'Day, who says she was assaulted in Combs' studio, still can't even say the full truth out loud. The fear hasn't left, even after all these years.
I think that they don't want, if they was in any of those freak-off tapes, if they played a part in any of those Diddy sessions, they don't want it to get out to the general public to make up their...
That silence speaks volumes. Then comes the most bizarre twist, a call from Combs himself back in the 2000s to Mo Supreme Shakur, Tupac's brother. During that call, he allegedly said, "I ain't have nothing to do with your brother's situation." But here's the strange part. Reem had never accused him of anything. In fact, he didn't even know Combs personally. So why make that call at all? Unless it wasn't really an apology. It was a test, a way to feel out how much the Shakur family might know, how suspicious they were, and how tightly he could still control the story. That's not the move of an innocent man trying to make peace. That's the move of someone used to staying one step ahead, managing every narrative, every whisper, every threat. But for the first time, that control seems to be slipping through his fingers. The empire that once moved in silence is now echoing with every name, every quote, every secret dragged into the light. And Combs might finally be realizing that this time, there's nowhere left to run. Here's the part almost no one's talking about yet. The money. Not the $200 million that vanished into secret accounts before the arrest, but the $1 million that was allegedly promised to Keith D for the Shakur hit. Back in 1996, that kind of money wasn't just a payout, it was power. It could buy loyalty, bury secrets, and make a problem disappear without a trace. But the thing about big money is, it always leaves a trail. And according to Davis, that cash didn't move directly. It was filtered through Eric Von Zip Martin, a Harlem figure known for his deep ties to the CRIPS. Combs even called him Uncle Martin. Martin passed away in 2008, the very same year Davis finally started talking to police. Maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's timing, but that year keeps showing up like a bad omen. Burroughs' journals mention Martin too, especially in the weeks leading up to the Vegas trip, with notes about special deliveries and out-of-town guests. It's those quiet little details that now sound a lot louder, especially knowing what we know today. And here's the part that doesn't sit right. If Combs was really trying to keep distance from any violent plot, why route the money through a middleman with a rap sheet and gang ties? Someone who could easily talk if things went sideways? Unless the real goal wasn't to hide the money, it was to hide where the money ended up. Because $1 million can do a lot of damage. It can buy a hit, it can buy silence, or if someone's slick enough, it can do both and still leave enough left over to make sure nobody ever dares to ask where the rest went. That's the deeper pattern buried in all this. Not just in the threats or the cover-ups, but in the way Combs allegedly turned tragedy into a tool. Even after the blood dried, he supposedly found ways to flip the pain into protection. A strategy that worked for years, until now. Look at how Combs handled Biggie Smalls' memorial service back in 1997. It wasn't just a farewell, it was a full-blown spectacle. The streets of New York shut down, fans packed every corner, and headlines called it the biggest funeral the city had ever seen. To the world, it looked like a heartbroken mentor honoring his fallen protege. But behind the tears and cameras, something else was going on. And it wasn't mourning, it was money. Kirk Burroughs, the man who managed Bad Boy's finances, claims Combs secretly insured the entire event. Not for love, but for leverage. Every single cost. The flowers, the limousines, the security, even the church setup was quietly billed back to Biggie's estate. That wasn't just heartless, it was cold business strategy. By the time the invoices landed, Biggie's family was already tied financially to Combs' label, making it nearly impossible for them to walk away. The message was brutal but clear. Even in death, the game was still his. And here's where the past starts shedding light on the present. This kind of move wasn't new for Combs. Burroughs also alleges that after the 1991 City College tragedy, the infamous stampede that left 9 people dead, Combs restructured Bad Boy's ownership through his mother's name to dodge financial responsibility for the victims' families. 9 lives lost, 0 accountability. That's not coincidence, that's a pattern. It's the same playbook every time. Use money to control the story, then twist that story to protect the money. It's manipulation disguised as management. But when it came to Biggie, this wasn't just another business maneuver. It was personal. What's coming to light now doesn't look like a string of bad choices. It looks like a full-on system, a system built on power, fear, and silence. And that silence is finally starting to break. The way Combs' team handled the Cassie Ventura case last year was a masterclass in how power shields itself from consequences. Even after that shocking hotel footage came out, showing him physically attacking her in a hallway, jurors later admitted they couldn't fully believe what they were seeing. One even described their relationship as overly in love after watching the tape, completely missing the violence right in front of them. That's not confusion. That's celebrity privilege at work. When your legend grows bigger than the evidence, the law doesn't just bend, it kneels. That's the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card. But here's the thing about myths. They only work as long as the people who built them keep believing. And right now, those myth makers, the same insiders, execs, and artists who once kept quiet, are starting to turn on him. Not because they suddenly found bravery, but because the math has changed. The power dynamics flipped, and loyalty doesn't pay what it used to. Combs isn't just drowning in lawsuits anymore. He's staring down possible prison time, a crumbling empire, and a war chest that's drying up fast. In today's industry, where artists don't need his approval to eat or make hits, the question isn't if the truth's coming out. It's whether the same system that protected him for 3 decades will finally let it happen. But the real insight into Combs' alleged role in the East-West drama isn't in the shootings themselves. It's in who he targeted and when. Tupac Shakur wasn't just competition. He was unpredictable, loud, and fearless, the one guy willing to call Combs out publicly. Remember, Shakur accused him of being behind the Quad Studios ambush in 1994. That wasn't just industry beef, that was a direct challenge to his control. And then there was Biggie Smalls. He wasn't just another artist on the roster, he was family, the one person whose loyalty Combs couldn't fully own. The timing between both tragedies is almost too clean. Tupac in September 1996, Biggie in March 1997, both gone after pushing back against Combs or stepping out of line with his version of events.
Let's talk about it, man. So you feel like it was bigger than Orlando shooter Pac. You feel like it's more to the story. You don't think it was that simple.
Now, with the spotlight finally turning back on the man who once controlled every narrative, the pattern's impossible to ignore. For years, fame gave him cover, but the same industry that built his throne is now watching it crumble, and no amount of hits can drown out the noise this time. And then comes the way Combs allegedly handled the fallout, not by denying, but by distracting. Right after the chaos, he suddenly turned into the face of peace and charity, the peace summits, the heartfelt interviews, the emotional tributes, the carefully staged grief. Every move felt rehearsed. Even his sudden pivot into his own rap career right after Biggie's death wasn't just a comeback move, it was survival. Because when your entire empire is built on other people's shine, the only way to stay on top is to make sure no one else gets the chance to outshine you. The real genius behind Combs' alleged strategy wasn't just in the violence, it was in how he made the aftermath work for him. Every tragedy turned into a headline, every headline into an opportunity. It's the kind of manipulation that turns pain into power. But here's where things start to look less like business and more like a confession on paper. That $200 million quietly shifted through accounts just before his arrest, that wasn't just about protecting his assets, it was about hiding leverage. Because when you've spent decades using money to keep people quiet, the one thing you can't afford is a trail that shows where it all went. According to Kirk Burroughs, Combs' own ledgers were almost too perfect, full of precise details. He logged car rentals tied to the Vegas trip, listed special deliveries with vague labels, and recorded spikes in payments to certain associates right before major problems mysteriously disappeared. That's not random accounting, that's insurance, a safety plan written in numbers and initials. But that kind of insurance only works until someone else keeps better records. And that's exactly what happened. Burroughs, the same man Combs fired 90 days after Biggie's death, didn't just keep his receipts, he's using them. He's back with a new lawsuit, and this time, he's holding the proof. That's not irony. That's poetry. The man Combs tried to silence is now the one speaking the loudest with documentation. And now, the silence from Combs' inner circle is deafening. No statements, no spin, no denials, just whispers behind closed doors. The ones who know the most aren't talking to reporters, and that says everything. Because when the people who built your empire start going quiet, it usually means they're talking to someone else. Someone who can't be paid off this time. They're not just hiding anymore. They're lawyering up. Mark Curry, once one of Bad Boy's biggest voices and a man who called Combs his brother, now says he can't even sleep at night thinking about the things he saw behind the scenes. That's not guilt, that's trauma finally catching up. And Aubrey O'Day, who claims she was assaulted in Combs' studio, still can't bring herself to say the full word assault in interviews. That silence speaks louder than any testimony ever could. Then there's Combs' own son, Justin, who stayed completely quiet since the Netflix documentary dropped. Despite claims he was around during those so-called freak-off parties, he hasn't said a single word. That's not coincidence. That's self-preservation. That's a family that knows what happens when someone breaks ranks, when loyalty suddenly costs more than it's worth. But here's the real tell. Combs' legal team isn't just fighting lawsuits anymore, they're fighting the narrative. Because in an industry where perception is power, the second the public starts believing the worst, it doesn't matter what the courts decide. Once the image cracks, the money dries up, the protection vanishes, and the connections start turning cold. That's the one outcome Combs' entire system wasn't designed to survive, the collapse of belief. And there's one more question no one's really asking yet. Just how deep do those CRIPS connections go? Because if Combs really did use gang ties to handle business with Shakur, then he wasn't just working with one contact, he was plugged into an infrastructure. And infrastructures don't just disappear when the spotlight moves, they get repurposed. Look at the patents. Some of the same Bad Boy associates from the '96 era still hold major positions in today's music industry. The same names that once moved in the shadows now run record divisions, label branches, and artist management firms. And on the other side, a few former death row figures have stayed eerily quiet all these years. Even the ones who once had every reason to talk. This silence doesn't sound like peace, it sounds like protection. It's the kind of hush that comes from people who know exactly how much noise could blow everything open. And if that wall of silence ever cracks, it won't just expose Combs, it could pull down half the industry with him. Every time the LAPD tried to push forward with Biggie's case, the same thing happened. Witnesses froze, stories changed, and momentum died. It wasn't just about two tragic moments in hip-hop history. It was about who controlled the story that came after. And nobody controlled the story better than Sean Combs. He didn't just manage the narrative, he monetized it. The peace summits, the documentaries, the heartfelt interviews, the polished image of a grieving mentor. All of it was built on one big assumption, that no one would ever dare to connect the dots. But here's the truth. Dots always find a way to connect themselves once the right people start talking. And now, those right people are finally speaking out. Insiders, ex-associates, former friends, and their voices are echoing louder than any PR statement ever could. The final piece of this puzzle isn't hiding in the courtroom or in the Netflix footage. It's playing out live in real time as Combs' empire crumbles right in front of the world. Record labels are dropping his artists, sponsors are cutting ties, and his once non-stop social media feed has gone from bold and defiant to dead silent in just a matter of weeks. That's not coincidence, that's collapse. This isn't just a legal downfall, it's a cultural excommunication. The same industry that once treated him like royalty is now pushing him out faster than his own team can react. Every headline, every leak, every new witness pulling the curtain back is speeding up the fall. And the scariest part, it's happening faster than even Combs' people can spin it. Because when you've built your entire legacy on controlling the narrative, the moment others start telling your story for you, that's the moment you lose everything. Your image, your influence, and the silence that once protected you. The Shakur allegations, the Biggie mysteries, the money trails, they're not random scandals. They're all symptoms of the same sickness that's been festering in the shadows of the music industry for decades. And diseases like this don't just fade away, they get exposed. So here's where we leave it. Not with closure, but with questions, because that's where the real truth hides. If Combs really used Tupac Shakur's name as a threat back in 2012, how many times did he use it before that? How many conversations started with that same dangerous line? And how many people stayed silent out of fear? When Keith D takes the stand this February, will he finally reveal the full list of names in that room when the hit was allegedly ordered? Or will he take that secret with him, leaving everyone else guessing? And what about that $200 million that vanished through bank accounts right before Combs' arrest? Was it hush money, escape money, or the desperate move of a man who saw the end coming fast? And maybe the biggest question of all, how many insiders knew the truth this whole time? How many kept their mouths shut not out of loyalty, but because they were paid, pressured, or straight up terrified? The silence of an entire industry doesn't happen by accident. It happens when too many people have something to lose. So now it's over to you, the watchers, the readers, the ones connecting the dots while the story keeps unfolding. The comment section's wide open. Pick a side, drop your theories, and tell us what you think really went down. Because when the dust finally settles, the real question will be, who's still standing when the music stops? If there's one thing 30 years of Sean Combs' career has shown us, it's this. In his world, the game doesn't end when he loses. It ends when everyone else does. Stay locked in. This story's still burning. Like, subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments because this one's far from over.